right. So I guess more stuff on the way I've been kind of sifting through all this bebop scale stuff. So one thing that I've noticed for myself and with some students that have worked on this is that it really helps to just like super immerse yourself in like the basic runs. There are like a lot of different interesting things you can do to make them cooler. But just working big time on the runs themselves and spending 10 times more time on the runs themselves than you'd spend on any particular embellishment of them, I think has a big payoff. And, so that can be frustrating, I think, for people because they see all this cool stuff. Like they look at this Dave Baker book or whatever. There's like 60 rules or things that you can do with these runs. And they think that if it takes them 2 months on these sort of basic scale runs, then that's like 60 times 2 months or like whatever it is, and I don't think that's the case. I think the more time you spend on sort of these basic runs and the more fluent you are with them, just the other stuff comes way quicker. Adding little things to the beginning or to the inside of them is just like much easier. And at least that's been my experience with it. One particular reason for that is that when you start thinking about the runs practically, if I'm playing in B flat 7 and I play from here, what we want to try and do with these is start resolving them, trying to make them sound like lines. So if it's a B flat 7, I would want to resolve to like E flat major or something. And sometimes that's just right there, like from B flat, I go, and that's a chord tone of E flat. So like done, from A flat, it's not. I have to think of some other way to resolve. And I could just go down to G. But here's sort of an oddball thing about these lines is that in these like stream of eighth note lines, a lot of the times they just kind of sound better when they resolve on downbeats, which is like counterintuitive because we think about these lines as sort of trying to unsquare them a little bit and make them a little more interesting, make them a little more jagged around the edges. We'd think landing and resolving on downbeats would be sort of square. But they tend to sound better when we do this. So instead of just going from A flat to G, I want to add something in between. So if I land on a note that's not a chord tone, I can sort of think of that as the first note of an enclosure, of a chord tone, because I'm only going to be a step away from a chord tone regardless of where I end up. So if I land on G flat, that can be like the first note of an enclosure if I'm enclosing G. So I might end up with this. Cool. Let's do the same thing from F. Enclosing E flat in that case. And then from D, or from E flat or D, but from D, that could be a chord tone of its own, I guess, the 7th. Or if I wanted to maybe make it the 6th, I could do the enclosure again. So I can run the scale up and down with these really simple resolutions. So starting from C, I don't do a half step, but I go then from B flat, then from A flat, then from G, from F, then from E flat, then from D, then from C, B flat again. So something about those lines is like they don't sound like lines yet, right? They still don't really sound like lines. They sound a little truncated to me, a little chopped. And something that makes them sound a little bit more like jazz lines is the addition of a little device that I've heard called the tag. And that is that like these lines really like to resolve on downbeats sometimes. They don't like to end on downbeats, So when we resolve squarely on this downbeat, what we can do is kind of unsquare the line again by hopping off on and ending the line on an upbeat, hopping off to somewhere else. Usually like a chord tone or something is cool, but it can be anything. I mean, whatever sounds good is good. So what I might do is kind of add a little tag, a little hop away, usually down, could be up, doesn't really matter. I think when you do this, you'll find like the down ones just like readily sound, like skipping down just sounds like, oh, it sounds cool. Skipping up sometimes it's like, it doesn't quite sound right, or sometimes it does sound good. So anyway, something to remember kind of about all these rules I'll kind of get into later, but here's from the B flat. So chord tone, right? Great. So on the upbeat, I just like jumped away to the root, to the E flat. Now I could do the same thing from here. That's my chord. That's my resolution. So, and that time I jumped down to the fifth, B flat, and then it's cool. So at that point, it seems like they're not super interesting lines necessarily, but my scale practice now looks like lines. It's like I'm playing lines. And everything that I add to them will look more and more like line building. So it's a cool way to start getting into the practice. So when you land on a downbeat, you land on a chord tone of the dominant, but you eventually want to resolve to the major. So if that chord tone of the dominant also happens to be a chord tone of the major, good for you. Into the line, you just sort of hop away on an upbeat and tag to something, all done, tied up in a bow. If it's not a chord tone, then you use it as like the first note of an enclosure. And then, so that you still land resolve on a downbeat to the one chord, and then hop away. And you end up with these little teeny baby seeds of bebop lines. And they're super cool. And it's a really nice way to make this scale practice start sounding almost like line building. It's not, but almost. So anyway, something they sort of stumbled onto there a minute ago is that these rules, I think like anytime anybody uses the word rule with respect to jazz stuff, but like speaking for myself, it's a simple way to express what I'm trying to express, but these are not hard and fast rules. Like maybe like I've been like transcribing some stuff and listening to stuff and like, I kind of noticed that happens like maybe like 65% of the time or something. Like that's a great starting place, like, it's common enough that like I gotta practice this and think about that as a thing, but like not nearly so common that we can call it like a hard and fast rule. If you break any one of these rules and what you come up with sounds nice, then that's good. But I think when we're working on line building and stuff like that, the obvious question when we start doing this sort of thing is like, well, what do I play though? Like, if I knew what sounded good when I was building lines, then like I'd already be doing it. Like I would play good lines. So having these sort of rules and guidelines, these sort of guardrails for you when you get going is really, 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 really helpful. Because then you might sort of realize like, oops, didn't mean to do, well, that sounded good though, So like you've got this framework where like, it'll sound like jazz. It won't sound like genius, but it'll sound cool. It'll sound good. It'll sound like what you expect it to sound like. And from there you branch out, do whatever you want to, but this is a really useful way to start getting this stuff kind of cooking. So anyway, that's a kind of a cool thing. I'm going to kind of keep updating, I think, on some stuff like this. So yeah.